We've seen here all these containers are full of millions of dollars worth of very high-tech equipment, but it appears that everything inside of there, while it is possible that it has a dual use, it appears to be used for the future construction of additional conventional munitions production on this site.
The containers were apparently buried so they wouldn't be hit by coalition bombing and to protect them also from looters. A technical expert's been going through the equipment for a final analysis.
In the heart of downtown Baghdad, Marines load up, not on food or water, but on the tools of war. Guns, rocket-propelled grenades, boxes and boxes of them, stamped Saudi Arabia and Yemen, and found in the basement of a city hotel. It's the same all over this city of 5 million, and many here are just waiting for the first civilian casualty, the first child to lose life or limb, picking up the deadly detritus of war.
Iraqi forces had left stores of their ammunition in place. And so the fact of the matter is the Marines came upon a lot of unexploded ordnance. And in the interest of safety, they had to dispose of the unexploded ordnance.
But it is a big job. Here, a playground. Iraqi forces put an anti-aircraft gun here, then fled, leaving behind ammunition by the boxful, even the barrel of a heavy caliber machine gun. The problem is there is just so much of it. Here, on a Baghdad street, live AK-47 ammunition, and scattered amongst that, live grenade detonators powerful enough to blow the hand off a curious child. Meters away, near roadside bunkers, an atropine injector kit to be used in case of chemical exposure, but cast aside, needle intact.
It's a case of we find a lot of it, okay? And we're making our way through it. We're making sure that it's disposed of in the correct manner, but it is going to take some time.
And so in playgrounds, schoolyards, even hospitals, that's where we found this live tank shell, the ammunition left behind by fleeing Iraqi soldiers. The Army and Marines have exploded much of it. We hear the explosions all day here, have hauled some of it off to get it off the streets, but some will be saved, we're told, to be used by a new Iraqi army in a new Iraq. Michael Holmes, CNN, Baghdad.
It was never going to be easy, bringing together Iraq's fractious political and religious groups. Local Shia Muslims rallied to denounce it as a sham. The biggest exiled Shia group boycotted the event. But 100-odd people did gather under canvas in Nasiriyah to discuss the country's political future, while the retired American general, slated to lead an interim administration, tried to give a sense of occasion to what was dubbed the big tent meeting.
I spent the night here last night. I did that so I'd wake up this morning at the site of the ancient city of Ur, and I said, what better birthday can a man have than to begin it not only where civilization began, but where free Iraq and a democratic Iraq will begin today.
Absent, too, was Ahmed Chalabi, the former exile thought to be the favorite of the Pentagon. Instead, his supporters have been setting up shop in Saddam Hussein's former hunting club in Baghdad. Here, they insist, the man wanted for alleged bank fraud in Jordan and with no obvious support inside Iraq is a natural to lead the country.
Dr. Chalabi has enormous popularity because he believes in democracy and freedom. He thinks the Iraqi people are tired of dictatorship and that this is the time for them to regain their confidence in themselves.
But on the streets of Baghdad, there are more pressing problems. A small but noisy group of protesters, some equating George Bush to Saddam Hussein, took their frustrations to the gates of the hotel housing most of the media, as well as the Army's Civil Military Operations Center.
They're meeting in Nasiriyah. They're trying to talk about Iraq's future, but still...
What kind of future is this? Is this the freedom? Is this what Americans want from Iraqi people? This is the freedom? What kind of freedom is this?
Nasiriyah today, we don't know anything about this news.
We don't have electricity to watch TVs. This is the first thing.
We cannot hear the news over the radio. We have no batteries.
4 and 5 days, nothing. Schools, hospitals, heating, security, killed in many places.
The looting, while not so widespread, is still going on, literally under the noses of the patrolling American forces. The trade and information ministries, as well as the town hall in Saddam City, were today's targets. One of the few ministries reported to be protected and unscathed is the oil ministry. There have been some joint patrols with Iraqi police, something of a novelty to this US Marine.
It's cool, I guess. I guess it's cool. Never done it before, so it's cool.
And efforts are underway to get more of the old police force back on the streets after an appeal for them to return to work. Though the promised vetting to weed out bad elements seems cursory at best.
Well, today the American forces in the city have been handing out leaflets, a message to the citizens of Baghdad, printed in English and in Arabic. It says they want to work together to restore essential public services, but at the same time it announces a nighttime curfew and also warns people to approach military positions with extreme caution.
A measure of military edginess, as was an early morning raid on the 17th floor of the media's hotel, the Palestine. Several Iraqis were taken away. It's not clear if they were detained and why.
And a blast at Saddam. Mohammed reopens his bookstore. Neighbors quick to point out he's not a looter. After a month's closure, dust thick on the shelves he prudently emptied before he left. Gone so long the clock stopped, but now he says it's time to restart his business. Today it's safer, he says. I didn't hear any tank shells or bullets. Next door, Mohammed the grocer is back at work. Candy and soda, all he can offer for now.
We are afraid. Anytime, but when the night is coming, we are closing. And I don't know. The next day, I see my shop safe or robbed.
At the bakery, war didn't stop Abu Ahmed working. But now he says making bread is getting harder. It's very difficult to do our job. We have a shortage of everything, he says. Electricity, flour, fuel, water, even salt. At the counter, customers wait patiently.
Losing the dignity and the honor.
But seeing us, many vent pent-up anger at the lack of electricity and security.
I wish that I am nothing now. I wish that I have no mind to think that my country, that I lost my country. Who can help me to feel that my country is still there?
Most stores here remain locked up and shuttered. Many businessmen, it seems, still feel it's too dangerous to open up just yet. The situation is still far from normal. Increasing their efforts to restore that normality, US Marines are now patrolling some Baghdad streets on foot, a more visible presence designed to help reduce looting. But unlike British forces in the south, these US Marines still in full combat gear. To help restore water and other much-needed services, Marines have been meeting with city planners and engineers. The shift away from fighting the war apparently not stopping the thinly spread US force from its original mission. This day, another weapons cache discovered by the Marines in the center of the capital. Possibly, however, the long days taking their toll. This Marine snatches a quick nap in a chair at Saddam's wife's palace. Most in the city, though, would likely prefer the Marines weren't this stretched, and there were enough to get the job done quickly.
American troops, in which at least 10 Iraqis died. US troops apparently opened fire after being fired on themselves by snipers. A French television crew which drove into the chaos by accident was stoned. All this took place as the Americans were trying to reorganize the Iraqi police force in Mosul in an effort to control disorder. The deaths are a major blow to their efforts. US military sources in Mosul say that their troops only fired after receiving fire from the crowd. They say their first shots were over the crowd's heads and that only later did they fire directly at the people who were firing at them.
Midnight in Iraq, and we're patrolling the streets of Kirkuk with Chosen Company of the 173rd Airborne Brigade. They're a small force with a big task, helping stabilize an ethnically diverse city of 700,000 people, almost none who speak their language. The patrol's first stop is a fire raging in a warehouse. Some of the neighbors think it was started by an arsonist who raced by in a taxi. But when the troops arrive, there's nobody here and nothing to do but watch it burn. U.S. soldiers on patrol are confronted by a nightscape that turns apocalyptic and inspiring. A mix of twisted metal and smiling Iraqi faces, more than happy to contemplate a future without Saddam Hussein in the picture. Throughout the patrol, random gunfire cracks through the night. It's commonplace to see men walking around with AK-47s. The locals we talk to say all the shooting is about celebration, not hate, so they're not terribly concerned. When we stop, the kids seem more interested in the soldiers' night vision goggles than in the occasional tracer fire streaking across the black sky. Everywhere we drive tonight, grateful Iraqis show up shouting.
Welcome, America. Hello.
I grab the patrol's translator and ask the Iraqis a few questions. What are their biggest concerns?
Same old story, my friend. Water, electricity, medicine, and food. The four basic things.
The soldiers ask for patience and promise to deliver water soon. The Army says it must be careful about perceived bias, whether it comes to Arabs, Kurds, or ethnic Turks. The mission presses on. There are more fires, more random gunfire. One neighborhood shows the soldiers the generator they've rigged up, complete with dozens of wires that send electricity running throughout the neighborhood. Around the world, there's been a lot of big-picture speculation about Iraq and its political future and the control of the oil fields. But on this one patrol, it's all about the small picture, the basic needs of family and friends.
So what is a Baghdad doctor to think when he hears that out at sea, high-tech military hospital ships run below capacity? In fact, the British RFA Argus, has 100 beds and is now sailing away from it all, back to England. Staying put, but only taking on 100 Iraqi civilians, the 1,000-bed USS Comfort. It has a state-of-the-art specialist burns unit. The British MOD wouldn't explain to us why these facilities aren't being used to help.
Terrorist or trophy arrest. Mohammed Abu Abbas, seen here in the mid-90s, thought he'd put his past behind him, but now he's in a US jail and could be there for some considerable time.
Abu Abbas is a terrorist. He was a terrorist, he remains a terrorist, and he will be viewed as such. But perhaps what's more important is he was found in Baghdad. And we've said for a long time that Baghdad and Iraq and the regime that no longer exists have harbored terrorists.
Head of Palestinian terror group, the PLF, Abbas masterminded the 1985 hijacking of Italian cruise liner the Achille Lauro. His men killed an elderly American, Leon Klinghoffer, and dumped his body overboard. But despite PLO membership, Abbas later claimed he'd renounced violence and seemed to have been forgiven and forgotten. Abbas admitted planning the 85 hijacking, but in 95, US President Bill Clinton signed a Middle East peace deal that appeared to pardon Abbas. In 98, the Israeli Supreme Court declared Abbas immune from prosecution. Yet 5 years later, he found himself arrested by the Americans.
Article 16, paragraph 3 specified that no Palestinian official from the PLO can be arrested or brought to court for offenses committed prior to September 13, 1993.
At his Baghdad home today, a Palestinian flag, one of the few items not ransacked or removed. Opponents claim the arrest's a flimsy US ploy to implicate Saddam Hussein in international terrorism. But if the Americans don't try him, the Italians might. They've already sentenced Abbas in his absence to life imprisonment. John Gilbert, 5 News.
Only building held by American troops inside the city. It's the former governor's office and it's been the scene of anti-American protests. In the last 48 hours, US Marines have opened fire twice, killing 13 Iraqis. We drove to the building this morning. Moments after we reached it, firing broke out.
Go.
It started with rifle fire. Then an American machine gun opened up and we raced for safety. The Americans say that their troops opened fire after being fired upon. They took us on a high-speed drive to the governor's office so we could see the situation for ourselves. We found Marines inside the building peering out at the Iraqis over their gun sights. An officer told me that the troops had behaved responsibly.
It's within their right to return fire in self-defense if they're being threatened with lethal force. I can't say that any of us are happy with this happening, but I think our guys are performing very well under the circumstances.
This building is supposed to become the hub of a new democratic city government, but all that seems a long way off. The truth is that in this city of 1.7 million people, no one is fully in control. The Americans are virtually under siege here in their headquarters in the center of the city, and they've responded with fire that's killed and wounded civilians. Here, it looks less like liberation than anarchy. Julian Mannion, ITV News, Mosul.
Doing their ward rounds and armed to the teeth, they are this hospital's first and only line of defense. They're all senior doctors, but they say they have no choice. It's the only way they can keep the looters out. In his office, the medical director shows us the discarded bullets and weapons he's gathered from the street to keep the looters at bay.
We need protection very badly, so we can work as doctors only. We'll keep our minds just for our patients. You know, when you hold a gun and examine a patient, he himself will not like that, the patient. He needs to feel safe, not examined by a doctor carrying his machine gun.
They have sworn never to bear arms and always to care. But in this hospital, these are desperate times. And while they've appealed to the Americans to give them protection, they are still standing alone. In another part of Baghdad, the US Marines have made their first attempt to ease the health crisis, bringing in the first consignment of medical supplies to the Baghdad Teaching Hospital. But they deny they've been slow off the mark.
Our number one job was security. We were still taking fire as late as last night. So when you consider that, I think we've done a good job.
Unfortunately, Iraqi doctors watching on said the supplies being delivered aren't what they need.
Yeah, we have in my store, I have this drug.
So you don't need this?
I don't any drug.
So what do you need?
We need antibiotics.
Retaking the central bank of Iraq. US Marines alongside armed local police officers back at work and with a tough job on their hands. For days, this banking district has been lawless, awash with looters and gunmen. Today, the Iraqi police got their chance to root them out. It was clear they were anxious to get back in control. Suddenly, from the bombed-out bank's main entrance, looters appear, surrendering. They've realized this bank is surrounded. They are desperate to show that they are unarmed. But they say men with Kalashnikovs, which we heard firing from the upper floors, are still inside. The Iraqi police, working with the Americans, are desperate to stop the looting. The Americans are concerned there are still gunmen in the building behind me. The Marines call for backup. As more rounds are fired from the bank, the prisoners cower in an alley. Within minutes, a rapid reaction force arrives and decides to push into the building. They find more looters, but those with weapons have either ditched them or escaped. The Iraqi police know this man well, a convicted criminal, one of thousands released when Saddam opened his jails. Tonight, he and the others are in custody. Though much of Baghdad is still lawless, this is at least a beginning. Andrea Catherwood, ITV News, Baghdad.